Good morning, Captain Rouse. Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, gentlemen. I am OT Colonel Alan Fairey, and today I will be briefing you on the effectiveness of the Air Force Suicide Prevention Program. More specifically, I will be advocating that the Air Force Suicide Prevention Program is not effective. In order to do so, first I will look at the contrasting opinion and a study that shows that the Air Force Suicide Prevention Program is in fact effective. I'll then look at some evidence to the contrary, that the program has not been quite so successful. And finally, I will give you a personal example on where this program has failed our airmen. I'll conclude with a brief summary of the topics that I've discussed. Now let's begin. Dr. Carrie Knox is a psychiatrist at the University of Rochester who was commissioned by the Air Force to do a study on the effectiveness of the suicide prevention program. Those results were published in May of 2010, and the study found that since the program's inception in 1996, suicides among Air Force members are down 21%, so that's a significant drop. Dr. Knox's study found several reasons for this drop. The first is that the program encourages members to seek help. It lets them know that there's avenues out there for them to get assistance if they're thinking about taking their own lives. A second reason was that the program focuses on giving members coping skills to address the problems associated with daily life in the Air Force, whether those be problems at home, at work, financial difficulties, or spiritually. The program gives them the tools that they can achieve success without thinking of suicide as an option. Thirdly, the program addresses a key concern by many airmen, which is that by coming forward with suicidal thoughts, they may risk their careers. The program tries to give them assurance that they will face no negative consequences to their careers by getting some help when they need it. Unfortunately, this study does not give us the full picture. In fact, an article by Tom Spath in the Air Force Times of April 2010 indicates that Dr. Knox's study stopped at 2008. If we look at suicides in the Air Force from 2008, 2009, and 2010, we'll see that suicides are actually back up almost 11%, reaching the levels that they were in the early 1990s before this program was enacted. So something's wrong here. The program's not working quite so well. In fact, earlier this year, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force declared a Wingman Day, halting all Air Force operations worldwide for half a day at a cost of millions of dollars to the taxpayer in order to address Air Force suicides. Now, we never would have had to have this issue if the program was working. That is a lot of money out of the taxpayer's pocket to address suicide. Another problem with Dr. Knox's study is that it fails to identify recently separated members who have committed suicide. According to a January 2010 study published by CBS News, suicides among recently separated members are up 27% in the past 3 years. So if we take those into account, the Air Force Suicide Prevention Program simply is not helping. Members are getting out and then killing themselves shortly after, yet we're claiming success because they're not currently active duty, so they don't fall under our study. Now, unfortunately, this touched my personal life early this year. This is a picture of my friend, Staff Sergeant Paul Anthony Lakis. He's no longer with us because he took his life earlier this year, not long before I came to OTS. Staff Sergeant Lakis, or Anthony, as his friends called him, was identified by his supervisor late last year as someone that was at risk for suicide. He exhibited many of the warning signs that we've come to recognize, including problems with alcohol, struggles at work, difficulties with the law, and some financial problems. So he was referred for treatment under the guidelines set forth by the Air Force Suicide Prevention Program. He had a 30-day inpatient stay, but when he was released, there was minimal follow-up, and they didn't stay on top of his care. So on March 19th, he drove to Holyoke State Park near Amherst, Massachusetts, and hung himself from a tree. Now I ask you, if the Air Force Suicide Prevention Program is so effective, then why isn't my friend here with us today? Today, I gave you some reasons that the Air Force Suicide Prevention Program has been shown to be effective. I then gave you evidence to the contrary, which shows that the program has not been so successful. Finally, I gave you a personal example about my friend Anthony, who took his own life after being treated under the Air Force Suicide Prevention Program. So clearly, the Air Force Suicide Prevention Program is not working. This concludes my briefing. Are there any questions?